Single responsibility principle. SRP a class should have only one reason to change, meaning it should only have one job or responsibility.
SRP single responsibility principle. What we are talking about in OOP, object-oriented programming. So the most we are talking about is a class, and the class should have only one job, and it should have only one purpose. So that's the single responsibility, and it should when doing changes, it should have only one reason to do the change, and so you see that the class should have only one purpose, and one responsibility, and one reason to change. For example, if we have a user manager class, and it do everything, it do file reading, file handling, it do validation, it do processing, it do save data, it do logging, it do emailing. So this super class, verified class, have doing everything, and that means there's no reusability. You cannot reuse this user manager class, and even there's a very common type of functions like file handling, validation, processing, saving data, logging, or emailing. These they can be, if you're putting your code everything inside your user manager class, then if you have other class that need a file handling, for example, for validation or processing, so you will repeat your code. There's no reusability. And if you're following single responsibility principle, so you will put file handling in a separate class, validation in a separate class, processing and repository like saving data into separate class. This means you can reuse your code. For example, for the file handling, it can be used for every other classes in your project, for validation, for data processing or repository. So you got the reusability, and it's easy to maintain. And for the better example of this, well, relating the SRP, single responsibility principle, like you have a class of user manager, it do everything. Like you have a function, and you have a string type of it. You have data of the parameter for the function of create user. Function one, the functionality one is doing is the purpose one for this class is doing read and pass file, and so you do read and pass file, the file and content, and you do validate data, and you say if content contains this character, and through exception, validating data. It do process business logic. It got the user, create the user, and save the user to database, and they do log the action, log, and they send the email notification. So this is a super big class, and they do everything just inside your function. So your user manager class have 6 different reasons to change. It has 6 purpose. File format. If file it has 6 different reasons to change. If the file format change, you need to go back to change this part of code. And if validation rules change, you need to go back to change the validation part of code over here. Every time you go to your user manager, and if your business logic change, you go to here, change the user manager. If your database schema change, and you go to here, change the code. And if your login format change, and you change here, and the email service change, and you change the email service. Suppose if you're doing everything, if your user manager class need to rewrite the unit test, if you are doing unit tests, so that's it violate the single responsibility principle. If you're following SRP single responsibility principle, so you will get 6 classes. One class is file handling, file reader, and you have function read and a pass of the parameter pass, and you can just return the file's contents. And you have class of user validator, and you have function validate, and you return a boolean type of true or false if the data is validated or not. And you have class of user processor, and you have function process parameter of data, return a user type. Get from the data, you create a user, return the user, and you have a user repository. Then you can save the user to database, database.insert. You have a class of activity logger, and you have function message type of parameter, and you log with the .info will log the message, and you have class of email notifier, and the function will notify the email address you send the email. So you have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 type of class, separate class. And for your user service, you're just using dependency injection in your user service constructor. You just inject the dependency of file reader type. You inject the validator of user validator type. You inject the user processor. You inject the user repository. You inject the activity logger. You inject the email notifier. And for your user service function create user, you just call the injected dependency file reader, like read file, and validator, you validate the data, and if user, you process the data, create a user, and save user to repository, log the user, and notify the user with the email. So in separate class, each class has its own one and only one purpose. And so this is easy to test in the code isolation. So when you do unit tests, for example, if the file handling change, you only need to do the unit test for the file handling. You don't need to do everything for the user manager. And the changes are localized, like you change in everything in each separate class. Is localized in, for example, file reader. So the code change only in the localization of file reader is isolated from the other separate class. And then your file reader can be reused, your validator can be reused, everything, this separate class can be reused, and easy to understand. So single responsibility is saying a class should have one and only one reason to change. A class has one and only one purpose. It has one and only one job. And it's better for testing. So smaller class are easy to do the unit test. And for the maintainability, changes are isolate and less likely to break other functionalities. So reusability, if you have more than one purpose of class, so you cannot reuse it. Single purpose class can be reused in a project and in the different contexts.